Chapter 15. Not only had their son survived, but they were heading to college. The end of high school. We better get in, Samson said to George and Ramik. Hey man, all three of us will get in. I'm sure of it, Ramik replied. We're in this together, George reminded them as he and Ramik worked on their applications for Seton Hall one afternoon in the school library. It's gonna happen. They were seniors getting close to graduation, full of both brash confidence and hidden fears. Yeah, you're right, man. If it hadn't been for our pact, I might not have even tried for this, Samson admitted. But I ain't gonna let you two jokers get some free education and leave me on the street to sell pencils. What did you put on page 3, question 7? Rumik asked as he chewed on a pencil. Oh, the question about money saved in a bank account? I put ain't got none, Samson replied with a laugh. The last time I saw the inside of a bank was when they were giving out free cookies to promote their new services. He sighed then. I think we got a chance at doing this, he said seriously. We have an opportunity to be something in life. I have a feeling this is right for us, man, George replied. How you get to be so positive and sure about stuff all the time, man? Ramik asked him. I don't know. I just believe it can happen. One of us might fail if he tried to do this alone. Three of us together just can't be beat. Well, I'm still applying to Howard, too, Ramik said. I gotta have a backup plan, and I hate to leave my boys Hassan and Ahi. I'm mailing my application to Seton Hall tomorrow, George announced. I mailed mine yesterday, Samson told them. Well, if that's the case, then I better get mine in too, Ramik said. The application from the three of us will blow everybody else right off the table. They laughed and headed out to their next class. Partly from the spirit of their pact, and partly from their fear of failure, the three used each other as crutches when one felt weak, as tools when another needed information, and as weapons to face the future together as they headed into the unknown. In the following weeks, each of them was called to Seton Hall, located in South Orange, a wealthy suburb of New Jersey, for an in-depth personal interview. George was called first. He and his mother found their way through what seemed to be a huge campus full of large brick buildings and perfectly kept lawns to the office of Carla Dixon, the student development specialist for the program. Barely 5 feet tall, with a warm, smiling brown face, she seemed much larger to George as he sat down in her tiny office. Why do you want to be a doctor, George? She asked. I've always had this hidden desire to do something in medicine, George admitted earnestly. Ever since my first visit to the dentist, I've had major dental work. I've thought being a dentist would be the best job in the world. He grinned, a dreamy look of hopefulness on his face. And if you become a dentist, what then? She asked. I'd like to start a clinic in Newark, I think. Lots of folks where I grew up didn't have access to good dental care, so they just ignored their teeth until it was too late. I'd like to help fix that problem. Carla scribbled fearlessly on her notes, nodding with approval. The program encourages the minority doctors we train to return to urban communities to work, she told George. I'm impressed. George breathed a sigh of relief and relaxed as he answered questions about grades and baseball in high school. You know, I have 2 friends who've applied to this program also, George told her. Oh, really? Carla replied. Yeah, we've kind of made a pact with each other to help us make it. A little like a support system for 3. We figured that if there were 3 of us, we won't feel so alone, and we'll have each other to support if we mess up. Again, Carla scribbled and nodded vigorously. This is very good, she said, almost to herself. She asked for the names of Ramik and Samson and made more notes on George's application. She then stood up, shook George's hand, and thanked him for coming. It will take several weeks to process all the applications, she told him, but you will be informed of your acceptance or rejection before school gets out in June. George left her office feeling confident and hopeful. Samson and Ramik had their interviews with Carla in the next few days. Each of them mentioned the other 2 in their interviews, although none of them knew it at the time. On a warm Friday morning in early April, Samson walked into the senior homeroom carrying an envelope. He looked at George and Ramik and smiled. "I got my letter from Seton Hall," he said. "Did you get in?" George asked. "I don't know. I didn't open it." "You mean you had the thing since yesterday, and you haven't opened it?" George asked. "I got my letter yesterday, too, and I opened it right away." "Well, did you make it?" Ramik asked. George looked triumphant. "Sure did." Then he looked at the other two, afraid perhaps that they had not been accepted. "What about you, Ramik?" Ramik grinned. "I'm in like sin, but I also got accepted to Howard yesterday." He looked a little confused. "But if all three of us get accepted, I think I'll go to Seton Hall with you two. We made a pact, didn't we?" The other two nodded seriously. "Well, open the letter, Sam," George and Ramik said at the same time. Samson slowly opened the envelope, unfolded the letter, and read it. Then he refolded it and replaced it in the envelope. "What did it say, Sam?" George asked. "I'm not telling." George and Ramik proceeded to tackle him to get the letter out of his hand. Okay, I got in. Of course I got in." The three friends looked at each other with exhilaration and satisfaction as the bell rang for the first class of that day. "Now what?" Ramik asked, suddenly serious. "We figure it out as it happens, I guess," George said. "The part that makes it not so scary is that we figure it out together," Samson added. The rest of the school year disappeared in a flash. Last-minute school projects, prom, parties, on graduation day dressed in burgundy caps and gowns, Ramik Hunt, Samson Davis, and George Jenkins marched proudly down the aisle to the thunderous applause of their parents and friends. Cameras flashed, speeches were made, families cheered as the names of their children were called. These students were the success stories, the ones who had not dropped out or ended up in jail or strung out on drugs. These graduates were the results of much prayer and hope and just plain luck. Parents wept with thankfulness. The families of Samson, George, and Ramik were especially proud that day. Not only had their sons survived the streets of Newark, but they were heading to college and planning to become doctors, a dream most kids could barely imagine. Caps were thrown into the air, and then it was suddenly over. A conversation with Dr. George Jenkins, strengthening the pact. When I learned that we were all accepted into the program at Seton Hall, a tremendous weight was lifted from my shoulders. I was terrified at the thought of facing the uncertainties of college and the difficulties of higher education all by myself. I think some of my constant pushing and encouraging of Ramik and Sam was based more on my own fear than on my confidence. Still, something inside me told me there was no obstacle that the three of us could not get through together. I'm not sure I would have made it without their friendship, support, and positive influence. I'm sure they feel the same way. We made a pact, a promise to each other to pull when one of us felt down, to push when one of us needed encouragement, and to stand by each other no matter what difficulties we encountered. That pact changed our lives. You can do the same. You can do the same thing, you know. If you can find just one person who believes in himself or herself, who believes in a future with hope and possibility, who shares your desire to make it, hook up with that person and work together to reach your goals. Create your own pacts